Okay, so today we're looking at something pretty wild. It's a single document, a complaint from one person against his own country, the Netherlands. But this isn't just any complaint. We're talking about a story that stretches back over 50 years, with accusations of a massive conspiracy reaching the highest levels of government.
You know, this whole thing really makes you wonder. What happens when it's just one person's word against an entire country's official story? Especially when that standoff lasts for half a century. So let's dive in and see how this one document tries to make its case.
So here's how we're going to break this down. First, we'll look at the core accusation. Then, we'll get into the two main phases, the alleged crimes themselves, and then the decades-long cover-up. We'll also look at the supposed legal dead end, how the whole thing has ended up at the UN, and we'll wrap up with a big question that's still hanging in the air.
Okay, let's get right to it. What is this 50-year accusation really all about at its core?
When you boil it all down, the complaint makes two huge, and I mean huge, claims. First, it alleges that terrible crimes, we're talking torture, were carried out with the state's protection. And second, that for the next 5 decades, the government itself systematically covered it all up, trying to make sure the truth never saw the light of day.
So the document breaks this whole long story into 2 parts. Let's start with Phase 1. These are the foundational crimes, the events that allegedly kicked off this entire 50-year battle.
And when you look at the timeline of what's being alleged, it's just staggering. It all starts back in 1972 with claims of being drugged and tortured. Then there's this supposed royal special decree that basically gave the perpetrators a get-out-of-jail-free card. The complaint even claims a neighbor who started digging into it was murdered. And then years later, an official rape investigation was allegedly shut down by the Ministry of Justice itself.
And that brings us to Phase 2. This is where the story really shifts. It's less about the original crimes and more about this alleged decades-long campaign to block justice at every turn. The fight isn't with people anymore. According to this document, it's with the entire system.
And the alleged obstruction just seems to go on and on. In 2004, the complaint says the police were actually forbidden from filing an official report, the very first step you need for any investigation. A year later, a court of appeal just throws the case out without hearing from a single witness. Fast forward a decade, and the whole thing supposedly gets flagged by U.S. authorities during a state visit. And then, just recently, both the Ministry of Justice and the National Ombudsman basically said, "We're done. This is our final answer."
And this, right here, this is one of those moments that, according to the complainant, is just jaw-dropping. The Court of Appeal rules there were apparently no criminal offenses. Think about that. And how did they reach that conclusion? The complaint alleges it was after they flat-out refused to hear from him or any of his witnesses. Just wow.
So you might be wondering, right? If these accusations have been around for so long, why has every attempt to get justice in the Netherlands failed? Well, the complaint has a theory about that, a really disturbing one. It calls it an engineered dead end.
The whole theory hinges on this wild idea called a secret curatele. What's that? It's the allegation that decades ago, the state secretly declared him legally incompetent, kind of like putting him under state guardianship without telling him. And here's the kicker. Under Dutch law, if that's true, any contract he signs is worthless. And what's the most important contract he needs to sign? The one to hire a lawyer.
And if this secret curatele thing is real, it creates the ultimate catch-22. Just follow the logic here. Step 1. The state says, we need a substantiated claim before we investigate. Makes sense, right? But step 2, to substantiate a claim this complicated, you absolutely need a lawyer. Okay, so get a lawyer. But then, step 3, the Bar Association allegedly tells him they can't give him a lawyer because his claim isn't, wait for it, substantiated enough. You see the loop? It's a perfect circle, an inescapable trap that, according to this document, makes getting justice literally impossible.
So, with every door in the Netherlands supposedly slammed shut, where do you go? Well, the case has now been escalated to the world stage. We're talking the United Nations Committee Against Torture.
So what's the argument at the UN? Well, it's all about how the Netherlands allegedly violated the UN Convention Against Torture. The complaint points to specific articles, like the one about preventing torture, citing things like electroshock, drugging, and this really interesting term, institutional gaslighting. Where the system itself makes you feel like you're going crazy? It also claims the state violated its duty to investigate and to provide a path to justice, arguing that, well, every single path has been blocked.
So after all this time, what does justice even mean? Let's talk money for a second.
The complaint refers back to a legal assessment from 2009. That assessment put the low-end estimate for damages at a mind-blowing $50 million.
But it's not just about the money. The complaint also asks for 850,000 euros. But not for him. It's to fund a full-length documentary. The idea here is what's legally called satisfaction. It's not about cash, it's about getting the truth out there for everyone to see, especially to repair a reputation that he claims was systematically destroyed by that institutional gaslighting.
So, 50 years on, after all the accusations, the paperwork, the rejections, where are we? What it all boils down to is a complete and total standoff. Two sides that just cannot be reconciled. On one hand, you've got the complainant saying, look, every single door in my own country has been deliberately slammed in my face. The UN is my only hope. But on the other hand, what's the state's official position, according to the document? It's that the claims just aren't substantiated. And their advice? You should contact a lawyer. Which of course brings us right back to that impossible catch-22 we talked about.
And so here we are. After half a century, this whole incredible story leaves us with this massive, unanswered question. It's really the core of the whole thing, isn't it? When you have one person's reality and a nation's reality, and they are polar opposites, who gets to decide what the truth is? And maybe even more important, how do they decide?